Bună ziua, doamnelor și domnilor! Ne reîntâlnim astăzi la o nouă ediție a podcastului Educație Deschisă by Eduzi. Astăzi l-avem invitat alături de noi pe domnul Vugar Babayev, coordonator educațional al Lumina Instituții de Învățământ. Vom purta discuția în limba engleză, așa că dacă sunteți pregătiți, ne punem centurile și dăm drumul la podcast. Mr. Vugar, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. Vugar, I know that you are from Azerbaijan, but your education journey took you to Southeast Asia, to Myanmar, Vietnam, other countries, and now back to Romania. But before discussing about your educational journey, let our audience know who is Vugar Babayev.
Thank you. So, as you said, I'm from Azerbaijan. I was born in Azerbaijan, and I actually got my education under also Soviet Union. So I have experience in terms of that era as well. So it was kind of turning point for our country. I got my education in Russian sector, but at the same time, I continued with an international schooling. Then I decided that I'd like to become a teacher. An interesting fact maybe you will like to know is that at that time there was pressure in the society about being a teacher. So I wanted to be a teacher, but the immediate environment, like my family or my relatives, they pushed me that you should not be a teacher, because there was this kind of negative perception about being a teacher, unfortunately. But in my heart, I wanted to be a teacher, and I found a way to become one. So I chose Department of Mathematics. So therefore, my educational journey started with that choice, where I joined Department of Mathematics, and I persuaded my immediate environment that it's a way to become, maybe to go for other different jobs. But somehow in my heart, it was about teaching. So I started my journey there, and I studied in Turkey, Bosphorus University, Department of Mathematics. And after I graduated in 2001, I moved to Southeast Asia because I wanted to explore different cultures. So my educational journey for 18 years that I spent in Southeast Asia, I took many different roles as a mathematics teacher, science teacher, as well as different leadership roles, like being a school principal, educational coordinator, examiner, as well as the evaluator. For 18 years, I worked in Myanmar, in Vietnam, and we were in touch with many schools, actually, in Thailand, Cambodia, Singapore, Malaysia. So it was quite a colorful experience. But then, after 18 years, with my family, with kids, we said maybe it's time to change. Maybe it's time to move on to another geography where we can explore a different culture, where we can explore something different, because we wanted some change.
Yeah. I want to go back a bit, because you've mentioned, despite all the pressure of the society and the relatives about not being a teacher, and I know that you're somehow passionate about chess at that time. If you can define in maybe one word or just a few words, what drew you to education? What made you actually change this roadmap from all the other things you could do to education?
It was my teacher, a mathematics teacher, who I'm still in contact with. He was basically the role model, for me, and I think that really inspired me. And you mentioned about chess, so I had inclination towards areas that required more of logical reasoning, skills, and I think that really drove me towards that. But main thing is my mathematics teacher, who was the role model for me.
Okay, and you've mentioned that during your time spent in Myanmar and Southeast Asia, you've took different positions, and you've coordinated, as far as I know, international programs like Cambridge, IB, bilingual schools in different contexts and cultures. So Now, when you've decided to come to Romania, closer to Azerbaijan, what did you know about Romania and the educational system here in Romania?
Actually, you mentioned that I play chess. So when I was participating in different tournaments as part of my professional chess life. So I actually came to Romania it was in 1995, and I came several times because I had to travel to different tournaments. That was my first encounter. That's what I actually heard before I came to Romania, but nothing more than that. But what I knew was that our cultures, Azerbaijani and Romanian cultures, are quite similar to each other. So in terms of how we act as a society, like we are both collectivist, societies. How we view the authority, for example, is something, or how we view success, for example, how we interact with people. There are many similarities. Culturally also, we have so many similarities. And in the past, in the history, we had good relationships, with Romania. And that's how I knew briefly about the country. But then I learned even more. So I had my own research before coming here, the research about the culture of Romania. And I went thoroughly into details, tried to understand really, how people think and how they make actually, choices in Romania. That really informed me. But I think more than that is when you come to the country, when you start interacting with people, when you meet people, then you get to know Romania. And that's where my knowledge, to a certain extent, came about, after I came to Romania.
Just for the ones that are watching this podcast now, so we had a chit chat before the podcast starts with Mr. Vugar, and you were mentioning that when you first arrived in Romania and you were appointed as educational coordinator of Lumina Educational Institutions and you were visiting the schools, you've been asked, who are you to come and change the system here? So,
yeah,
it's a tough question for someone newly come.
Yes, it is.
How was that feeling? How did you experience that question?
So, yeah, it was a kind of challenging question, but as I mentioned, I really wanted to understand the Romanian context. I mean, not only educational context, but also the people and how they view actually different things, such as, education. It was a very interesting question. Many of the people, all of the people were quite welcoming, by the way. When I came in Romania, and we were so happy that we made this actual choice to come to Romania with my, family, my kids. When I was asked this question, I wanted to really go deep down into the subconscious, what is it actually about? So I think considering our context of Lumina, so I was going to a school where a teacher was asking me this question. So deep down, I think there was an assumption in the question. So the first thing that I thought is that who are you to come and try to change us? What lies in it is that there's a divide between the personnel or the staff and the general, let's say the head office or the people who actually oversee, multiple, schools. So that's why we had to actually change that idea. So basically I started this series of questions to her, and I said, first of all, the assumption there in that question is that it's you and us. It's actually, I'm coming here to really understand the context, because I'm new and I want to really understand what's going on, what's it that we can do to, work together. So therefore we are in the same team, first of all. So the second part of it was about change. I know that many people may not necessarily like change. And I accept it, because there are so many things that we don't need to change, because if it's working, just go with it. Go with it. But I started asking her, telling her, do you think that the school needs to develop? So I started focusing on the word develop. Do you think that the school needs to develop? And then she said yes. And then I continued asking, do you think that your department or your school leaders need to develop? And they said yes. Do you think that you need to develop as a teacher? And then her response was, yes, of course I need to, develop. And then I said to her that then I would like to be, or we would like to be, part of this development journey for you. We need to be in it together. And if this development requires certain change, then we need to change so that we can adapt to the expectations of the era. So that was the interaction we had with her. That was very interesting. And I think that question really laid the foundation of what we are trying to do now as Lumina educational institutions.
Just out of the curiosity, so this is the 6th year in Romania,
Yes.
if I'm not wrong. So this was first when you came in Romania and you were visiting the schools. Did you ever had the chance to meet that teacher again and see her opinion right now, or how?
I don't really remember, the teacher, and I don't want to really take it personally because I think it's a question that needs to that's allowing me to reflect. It's not something that I can take it, personally, and that's why that reflection, I think, as I said, it's kind of helped me a lot to understand some of the aspects of teaching and learning and the school context that we are working with.
I want to go back a bit to your educational context.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you've worked so many years in international context, Southeast Asia, you've mentioned Myanmar, Vietnam, taking different positions. So, in a very honest and open way, if you would compare the education systems from the countries in which you've worked with the education system in Romania, starting with the system itself, the way the students or the teachers see the education, or how do they learn. So if you would make a benchmarking between those, how do you see the education system in Romania?
I mean, of course, there are always differences in terms of the educational systems because we are living in different cultures, contextually. I mean, when you look at the expectations of the parents, of the students, of the community, and the market, for example, it really makes the whole difference. And it pushes the educational systems to basically shape their their systems, accordingly. And in that regard, in Vietnam, it was quite different, where people had different, expectations. Culturally, it was quite actually different. I think it's the same thing for, Romania, that there are differences just because of the even geographical location somehow pushes us to think, differently. So that's why I cannot there are different things, and that's why I don't want to really compare. But there are some similarities in terms of the concerns or maybe some of the challenges the systems are facing, which I believe some of them are really universal.
Let me ask it in another way.
Mm-hmm.
What was the biggest surprise, the most positive surprise that you have faced in the Romanian educational system? And name one gap. It doesn't have to be negative, but one significant gap between the systems in the Southeast Asia and the one in Romania.
I think what I saw here is that most of the students are quite motivated and they would like to be challenged. They would like to go extra mile to really find their own, voice. And they are quite vocal in terms of the pains and struggles they are facing, and this is very obvious also when we are meeting a lot with our team. We are meeting a lot of students, teachers and parents, and when we talk to the students, the best feedback or the best ideas about education are coming actually from the students. That's what I love about Romania, and that I believe is something that can drive meaningful education in Romania, the voice and choices of the students, and that should be the agent for change, actually, for the Romanian education system.
Speaking about the change, so spending so much time in Romania, and I know that you're also teaching,
Yes.
not only coordinating. There is a well-known fact that the Romanian teachers are very well prepared in terms of knowledge. You know, they are very good from pedagogical and methodological perspective. If you would name one thing, I mean, the paradigms in education are changing constantly, new things appearing in education. One thing that can be worked more by the teachers in Romania, one aspect that can be improved more than the others, what would that be?
Actually, there are so many good things about the teaching staff in Romania. I mean, them adapting to, you know, most of them adapting to change and trying to look for something that's meaningful, you know, for the students. I'm teaching theory of knowledge. It's also mathematics. Theory of knowledge is a critical, you know, thinking course. It's basically questioning the certain, you know, paradigms, the foundation of knowledge in mathematics, natural sciences, arts, history, and human sciences, and so on. So it's basically about, you know, critical thinking. So it's not always about when you have this kind of system, then you as a teacher try to adapt to it. For example, this is part of the IB diploma, you know, program. So the system somehow pushes the teacher towards something more meaningful, let's say. If you undertake this, then the rest of the things like assessment, the curriculum design, and the professional development activities that you do are done actually, you know, around it. So I'm not always looking, I mean, the change, okay, may start from the teachers, but I think we should also look at what we provide, how we define education in such an era. With all the developments that we are seeing now, I think the meaning and definition of education needs to be reconsidered. So at the time when students have easy access to knowledge, at the tip of their fingers, they could just type something and then they can get actual responses through many different, you know, platforms, including AI. So in such an era, I think the focus should shift towards something probably more, you know, meaningful. And what I'm trying to say here is basically education which puts human at the center, or let's say the human aspects at the center. And by that, we need to make sure that we develop systems where we can address students' social, emotional aspects, their physical aspects, their moral, you know, aspects, besides, of course, intellectual, you know, aspects. So these are the things that AI actually is not going to be able to, you know, do. So once we have this kind of, you know, systems, then the expectations from the teachers is going to be there, you know, as well. So we cannot ask teachers to change something if the organization or if the system doesn't support it. You know, in our work about professional development, one of the things that we say is that if you are taking a professional development to improve yourself, to develop yourself, then one of the conditions is that the system or the schools need to actually support it. Let's say if you are taking a critical thinking course and it's something really amazing, it's nice to have, it's nice to take. But when you come back to your school and there is no approach for teaching and learning where critical thinking is there's no place of critical thinking in your school, then there's no value, there seems to be less value of the course that you're actually, you know, taking. So that's why there are many things that teachers could develop. I'm looking at myself, I'm getting feedback, you know, from the students. And one thing I'd like to say is that I think teachers need to listen more to the students and listen more, not only at certain, let's say, intervals, but let's say regularly, like on day-to-day basis, on weekly basis, listen to their ideas with simple questions like, how did you learn? What did you learn? How did you like it? Do you want me to would you like me to do something different to make your learning more exciting? Would you like me to do something better, or would you like me to offer different activities that could make it relevant, for you, for your interest, or for your needs, for your expectations? I think that's something that we could all actually work on.
Are you doing this in your classes?
Yes.
Okay, nice.
So it's also, this is something is part of the system as well, and at the same time, it's also about talking to students informally as well. I believe that the human connection is where you informally, especially informally, you talk to the students and trying to see how they feel, about learning. That's very, very important. It doesn't have to come through, let's say, a survey, or it doesn't have to come through, let's say, certain discussions in the class, let's say, because some students may not feel, comfortable, but it could be also informal chit-chat.
That's the informal way. Actually, the question that I've asked earlier was guiding the discussion actually to another question that I wanted to ask. So you are one of the founders of the idea of Educație Learning and Development Hub. And that hub raised actually as a response to the need of the professional development within the schools. First internally in the Lumina educational institutions, but then the hub started offering services also outside. So how would you describe the approach of Educație? What was the real pain that actually led to this idea and the creation of this hub? Because you are mentioning that yes, there can be change, but it should start more informal in the class with the teacher, with the students, but also there are formal things that needs and can be done. And this Educație Learning and Development Hub is one way to approach it. So what was the pain, or what was the main idea behind when this initiative started?
So I want to probably, in order to maybe explain this, maybe answer this question, maybe I'd like you to take a bigger, maybe a more holistic view for you, so that for the viewers also. When I came in here, I wanted to make sure that we have a dedicated team who can actually work with the schools. And this way, because it's not, as it said, no man is an island. So here, that we need a team so that we can work with the schools around certain things. Our mission has been very clear, and we haven't changed our mission. It's about ultimately impacting teaching and learning. And we do it through consultation, support, and evaluation services. And we also develop standards, for the schools. So all these aspects are quite interconnected with each other. And when we look at all these different aspects, it's about putting the humans at the center. So, and this has been my pain for the last 20 years or more. I have been, as a leader, as an educational leader, it has been always a question in my mind: how do we develop systems, or how do we develop approaches, or how do we provide training in a way that actually impacts people? Because we have so many obstacles now. We are busy. When you look at school managers or directors, they are so busy with tasks. They are so busy with many different things like logistics, legal things, or financial stuff. All these kind of things are necessary, but they are not sufficient. They are kind of they could be obstacles, for the people to reach actually the kids. Sometimes we forget about the quality of teaching and learning, going on, in the school. So in this regard, when I'm thinking about it, we need to develop leadership actually for learning approach. So the support service, which is about training, for the adults, it's also part of this whole actual process. All these let's say aspects I'm talking about, like consultation, support, and evaluation, they are all interconnected with each other, and it has to be as such, and they have to be built upon certain actual principles. So having said that, the Educație Learning and Development Hub is basically part of the support services. It aims to provide meaningful, relevant training for the teachers that basically can support them, and it can help them to develop, and they can they're learning because it's a lifelong learning process, that would like to be part of it in terms of the support services.
What do you think actually changes or develops a teacher? You are offering support, you are offering consultation, you are offering many services, but what do you think that really changes a teacher?
Yeah, it's a tough question. I think everything starts from within. I mean, somehow you need to create that need. I mean, the urgency for need, right? So, but also, it's about the individual teachers who, some of them are very proactive, some of them are they have this intrinsic motivation that you don't need to really actually push them towards development. I have undertaken many different trainings, including from the IB, the Cambridge, as well as from based on the bilingual systems as well as an evaluator as well. But what I find, what these kind of trainings provide you, maybe it provides you the framework, right? But let's say as a mathematics teacher or as a theory of knowledge teacher, what I'm trying to do, for example, now is to make sure that I'm able to provide relevant feedback to my current students so that they can they can achieve the best possible grade, let's say, in theory of knowledge, because they have to write an essay and so on. So for me, the best professional development here is basically something that happens in the school. If you have this kind of culture, if you have the culture where teachers share with each other the ideas, they work together to, let's say, moderate the essay or provide feedback or do maybe self evaluation, and it's a constant maybe communication, it's a constant dialogue, it's a planned dialogue, it's a rigorous and planned dialogue that you do that actually develops the teachers the most. It's something that happens in the place where they're actually practicing their teaching. It doesn't happen out there, it doesn't happen outside in some kind of workshop. So this is, I think, something that has to be taken very seriously. The professional development trainings that are being undertaken, what in our institution, what we say is that the professional development activities that you undertake, they basically correspond to like 10% of your learning. The rest of the 90% of your learning actually happens in the school. It happens in your institutions where you are at, which means the 20%, it basically corresponds to the social interactions. That means when you come back, when you share, what happens is your idea blossoms, and then you are able to generate even more ideas to develop all these things that you learned, in your school. And 70% actually is the learning that happens when you apply all these things and you try to see what impact it has, on the students. So that whole process needs to be defined so that the teachers could benefit from this professional development activities in the most effective manner.
So we've discussed about your approach as a teacher. We were discussing about the education coordinator perspective and looking to all the services that your department is offering. I know that you are also part of the Lumina board, right? Which overlooks all Lumina schools in the country. So from one single school in 1994 now to 14 schools in 2026 all over Romania plus in the region. What is the aim or the objective of the education quality standard for the next years in terms of teachers and students? I mean, a growing entity, also keeping the standards high is getting harder and harder each day. How do you cope with that? What is the objective for keeping these standards high?
If you're asking me about the future plans or, how do we go, about the education for Lumina schools. So as I said, the mission for us has been very clear to impact teaching and learning. And I think it's a kind of constant struggle to make sure all the things that we do are for them, for the teachers as well as the students that who have been entrusted to us. It's a kind of responsibility, and in this regard, we are working with the school leaders to make sure that we can provide something that's actually relevant, for the kids. Because the educational platform is changing so much, it is very important for us to set structures where we can always think of new ways of making education, relevant and meaningful, for the kids. One of the questions we are asking the students from our schools is that if they are able to connect their learning to real life or their future goals. And one of the things that I think in the system that we are working in, we need to do is basically make sure that they are connected, that their learning is connected to real life. And one of the problems of education is that we have disparate, let's say, areas of knowledge, disparate areas of knowledge, and somehow we need to find ways to connect them. So if there's a great connection that you can find between mathematics, sciences, and arts, and so on. So we need to find ways, even though it's not ideal, but we need to find ways to actually connect them and make sure that we can connect all these ideas to real life. So in this regard, we have developed one course, as an example I would like to give you is the course is called From Knowledge to Meaning. This course aims to ensure that teachers and the students are able to connect what they learn not only to real life, but beyond, to universe, to the ecosystems, and making sure that all of the subjects that they are learning, all the learnings that they actually undertake are connected to something actually bigger, that they can try to find answers to the bigger questions that they have.
Well, that's really impressive, and congratulations for doing that. Talking to you is so nice. Maybe we can talk for hours. Unfortunately, our podcast has a limited time and we are approaching the end of it. I will keep one final question for the end, but before that, I would like to go through a rapid fire series of questions, if you are fine with that.
Okay.
So I just took a few notes based on your background. So the first question for you: the best classroom you have ever walked into, what made it special?
Well, I can't remember all but the recent one was where students they worked on a project for a long time and they were presenting it, and the rest of the students were doing the evaluation and providing feedback, to the student. And that was really, powerful because it allowed the student to also reflect on how actually he did.
Okay, next one. One book or resource every educator should read.
The recent one, probably, I would say Visible Learning by John Hattie. I think it's something that all teachers, but also school leaders need to, read.
Okay, what do you prefer to be, a teacher of theory of knowledge or mathematics?
That's a very tough question. Probably at this moment, theory of knowledge is a bit more dominant, but I love teaching both.
Okay. What role do you feel most comfortable with? Teacher, educational coordinator, or member of the board?
I think I'm most comfortable, and my love for teaching makes it quite, different. That's why I'd love to be a teacher, and I'm quite down to, teaching, because it's where you can see that you can have opportunities at least to make certain maybe changes or work with people to, develop them.
If we would have the possibility to go back in time, what would be your advice to the younger Vugar from Myanmar starting his educational journey?
Actually, if I go back to Azerbaijan, I will probably advise myself to be able to communicate with the people despite the pressure that I mentioned at the beginning, despite the pressure, and make sure that I can share my passion, and so that I could have made the right choices in terms of my career. That would have made the better start, for me, probably.
Thank you. And now coming to the final question. So I assume that a lot of teachers will be watching our podcast in Romania specifically, and it doesn't matter whether a private school or a state school. So if a teacher is watching this podcast, what would be the message that you would like them to walk away with?
The whole journey is about them, the learners, the kids. Stephen Covey is talking about the principle of contribution. The principle of contribution is about trying to contribute to the others in terms of education and other different aspects. And there's a lot of research saying that when you contribute to others, then your well-being or your intellectual growth, your growth is also taken care of. So that's why when we try to help the others, somehow our needs are also being actually met. So I think what teachers need to know is that it's a very noble. It's not a job. It's a noble endeavor, and that's how we should actually, see it. It's not a job. It's not a task that we do. It's about humans. So when we contribute, when we work for other people, it's actually makes us better, and our needs are also taken care of.
Thank you very much. This was inspiring for me as well, and hopefully for everyone that is watching our podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, this was a podcast out of the Educație Deschisă series, having today with us Mr. Vugar Babayev. Thank you very much for your presence in our podcast.
Thank you for your time.
Doamnelor și domnilor, am ajuns la sfârșitul podcastului nostru. L-am avut invitat alături de noi pe domnul Vugar Babayev, coordonator educațional Lumina Instituții de Învățământ. Până la o următoare întâlnire, mulțumesc și să aveți o zi frumoasă!